right. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, this is Jeff with Skyline. I appreciate everybody taking time out of your busy schedule today. I did turn the recording on so we can make this available afterwards for others on your team that might not have been able to attend today if you want to review it. And also, thank you. I know that high percentage of the folks that are on here today have been with Skyline for many years, and we appreciate your trust in us. And today, again, I'm Jeff with Skyline, and I say Skyline, and I really mean Sockeye. And I'm still getting trained. And I've also got Eric Ward, president of Sockeye, who's going to be doing the presentation today. And between Eric and myself and some other Sockeye folks, we'll try, if you have questions, we'll have some pauses today. We can try to answer questions, but probably the best way would be to ask those through the question/chat panel that's in the Zoom dialog box in there. And we'll try and monitor that and interject those questions as we go along through the presentation. And we're going to cover a lot of stuff. You know, it's going to be high level, fairly high level, but just for those that haven't seen the product before, and give you a little bit of a feel for it. And we can certainly, of course, follow up with presentations as well. But I know probably many of the folks on here aren't familiar with Sockeye, and but Sockeye's been around for quite some time. They've been established since 2007, and they've got construction clients across the country. They have been focusing on the Sage Intacct for about 4 years, I believe is the number in there. And they've got many construction clients, and they are one of the top, or we are one of the top Sage Intacct partners recognized this past year as a premier partner in the Sage Intacct channel. And really, you know, very similar to Skyline, it's a lot about building relationships and partnerships, and you know, not just selling the software, but being there for you for the long run. And I'll talk a little bit about their CSP, or their customer success plan, a little bit at the end, but it's a subscription model, and we've been very excited about, you know, some of the things that offers our customers. And for those that don't know, as I alluded to it, Skyline was acquired by Sockeye in 1st of February or into January, so it's been about 4 months now. And everybody from the Skyline team has come over to Sockeye, including John and myself and Tricia and a lot of the folks that you've all worked with for years. And just a really good synergy between our two companies. And Sockeye had a lot of experience in the Sage Intacct for construction. It was a newer product for us. We obviously have a lot of 100 contractor and 300 contractor clients. So really, it's been a great fit, and we're very, very excited about it. So if you didn't know about that, you just got some breaking news today if you haven't seen some of the emails in there. But just a little quick background. I know a lot of the folks on here know this today, but you know, Sage started out as Timberline over 40 years ago, and it, you know, and along the way they were acquired by Sage in the early or mid 2000s. And so your Timberline, you know, is now your Sage 300 construction and real estate, and some of the folks that are on Sage 100 contractor. So those really have been our two, you know, rock solid solutions that we've had available for the customer base. And then more recently, Sage Intacct Construction, and I'll give you a little bit of background on Sage Intacct Construction and the Sage Intacct product. And many of you might not know too much about Sage, and that's probably why you're here today. But Sage is one of the only, or they are the only company recognized by the AICPA, which is the largest membership of CPAs, and they set the standard for accounting professionals. And so they are recognized by them and endorsed by the AICPA. So there's no other accounting software across the board in any industry, not just construction, that is endorsed by them. So it's a pretty big it's a pretty big deal. Also, Intacct is a leader in the Gartner space in the #1 in customer satisfaction. So that's Gartner's an independent group that surveys users out there about their software. And then they're also recognized as a visionary with their cloud financial management solution. So Sage Intacct is a modern cloud solution. I know that's something that a lot of our folks have been, clamoring for a while, but I think you'll see today there's, really solid workflow and a lot of customization. We'll talk about integrations because we're a cloud solution. It's 100%, built in the cloud for the cloud from the beginning. There's a lot of open APIs, and we work with a lot of the partners that you're all used to seeing, but there's many more companies that are out there in the Intacct marketplace. And then also Eric will show today, how easy it is to see real-time dashboards and drill down on information. So some of the things that we necessarily haven't had today in there. And you'll recognize a lot of these names I know that are companies that you work with today. Maybe some you don't, but these are all current Sage partners that are in the Sage channel. And there's also, as I mentioned, in the marketplace, in the Intacct marketplace, there's actually hundreds of other partners that are in there. And I didn't mention this earlier, but the Intacct solution was built in actually 2000. So they were one of the earliest cloud software. So it's not a new software. There's about 15,000 customers that are using the Intacct software today. It's just newer. Sage is, since they acquired Intacct about 3 years ago, or maybe more now, they have been working on building out the construction piece of this, and it's been out for over a year now, and they've been working on it for the previous year and a half or 2 years before that. So it's a really solid financial system, and now with some great construction pieces that were added to it, and they're continuing to add to that part of it as well. So there's a whole, because it's a cloud software, there's multiple releases a year, so things are coming out on a regular basis. So with that, I'd like to introduce Eric Ward, who's president of Sockeye. And like I said, Eric's going to do the presentation today, and we will go from here. Let me stop my sharing, Eric, and you should be able to take it.
I think you might have to make me the host, Jeff.
Okay. There you go.
Great. Thanks. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Eric Ward. I've been working inside of Intacct for about 5 years now, and I'm really excited with the construction features available inside of Intacct. So I'm excited to show those to you today. I'm going to share my screen out here. There we go. All right. So I'm going to walk you through Intacct, some of the features and just kind of an overview of what Intacct looks like and how to navigate around in Intacct, some of the features and functionalities of the product. And then today I'm going to get in a little bit into the details of working with a WIP report and automating some of the procedures with revenue. With revenue recognition and posting. All right, so the first thing you'll notice here inside of Intacct when you log in and see the dashboard for the first time is that it's a very modern application. This is different than taking an old on-premise software and hosting it in the cloud. This is software that's built for the cloud and uses all the cloud technology. So you'll notice here that when I first log in, I'm looking at a dashboard. And this dashboard is summarizing all the information across all of my entities. So up on the top here where it says top level, I'm logged in at the top level, meaning I'm not in one specific entity, but I'm looking at all entities at once. One of the great features and functionality of Intacct is that we can work at the top level, not just from a reporting perspective, but also transact. So we can enter in transactions at the top level and then code the different lines or expenses or revenue of the transaction to a specific entity, and all the due to, due from accounts are hit appropriately to keep everything in balance. If I want to log into an individual company, I can just select that entity from the dropdown, and it just opens up another tab here, you'll notice, with that specific entity. And I can always click back here on the top level, my original tab, to see everything consolidated and be at that top level again. All right, so the dashboards inside of Intacct are pretty dynamic. You can have as many different dashboards as you want, and different people can have access to different ones. You can filter the dashboards from the user so that the user only has access to certain filter set of data, or you can use them, leave them wide open and let the users filter the data. So you can see right now on this dashboard, I'm looking at the date as of March 31st, 2020. So it's an as of date. All of my numbers are represented as of that date. I also have the functionality here to provide other filters. So for example, if I wanted to look at a specific entity or location within an entity, I can click on this drop down, or I could start typing and it will start filtering out my options for either the entity name or the entity description, ID, excuse me. I've added not just the entity and location filter, but filters on jobs and filters on specific items as well. Just to give another example here, if I look at my jobs, if I wanted to filter this by just my jobs that have to do with hotels, I can select the hotels, not just one job, but all jobs that are flagged as jobs for hotels. And then I can see the report rendered with just that information in just those projects. I could furthermore say I want to look at just subcontractors on those projects and add another filter here, and that's going to filter that information further, both revenue and expenses, everything having to do with a subcontract. Okay, so it's really dynamic in terms of looking at the data and allowing you to slice the data in different ways to get what it is you want to look at. A few other things on this dashboard that I'll point out is that we can keep track of both financial information. You can see project profit margin here. We can do calculations like margin percent. We can do statistics like active number of jobs or active square feet in construction, head count of employees or anything like that. So we can keep track of statistics and then use those statistics to perform any calculations we want to with the financial information as well. All of these give us the ability to drill down too. So if I wanted to look at my AR, for example, I could click here and see the drill down of that, the difference between the AR, and continue to drill down all the way to the source transactions. Okay, and that's not just from these performance cards, but from the reports as well. So one of the powerful aspects of Intacct is that ability to drill into the information that's presented to get you to the source data where you can ask questions or look at the details of those transactions. The dashboard pulls information across the platform. So pulling information from your projects, pulling information from the financial, the general ledger, or from accounts payable. Across all of the application, we can access the information and pull those into our dashboard. You can see as an example, this project overview report is a report that is pulling in different types of information. So we're looking at things by job here. So a list of my jobs. We're looking at the contract amounts. So this is the contract with the owner. We're looking at project estimates. And then we're doing some calculations off of those. And then we get into other information. So commitments would be my purchase orders or subcontract agreements that have been executed on those jobs, of what's outstanding, what's remaining on those. We can see total build and total cost amounts, and all of these aspects we can drill down. So if I wanted to drill down on this number here to see the commitments on that project, it's going to bring me to a list of all of those transactions, and I can continue to drill down. So this subcontract agreement here, and I can continue to drill down all the way to the actual subcontracts for that transaction. Okay, so if I need even to edit a subcontract, I could click on that edit, and I have this subcontract agreement right here in front of me then. All right. So whether it's a subcontract agreement, a purchase order, the estimate itself, the billing for the owner, or the costs, we have all those drill down functionality at our fingertips. We can also do some conditional highlighting to draw our eyes to things that might be important. So the percentage of committed and spent on a project. So that on this column here, I have it highlighted in red if it's over 100% of committed costs, or cost plus the committed costs of my actual estimate. So you can see that here I've overspent quite a bit, and that draws my eyes to that there's something important here. Also, the yellow one is getting close to the threshold of 100% of the costs committed. And then I've highlighted in blue these numbers that are zero. They might be, there's something going on or some data missing here. So we haven't made any commitments, or we don't have any estimates in this case. So there's more action that needs to take place on those values. So again, just a quick way to be able to pull data across the system to view and draw eyes to things that don't seem right or are important. And then to be able to take action from that into a drill down and ask questions. We also have the ability to, as we get into these transactions, I'll just continue to drill down on these actual costs here. All the transactions inside of Intacct offer us the ability to post a social type feed for questions. So on this specific transaction for time entries, I could ask a question simply by typing the @ symbol, and I can start typing a name. So I just typed in @D, and it brought in a user called Dennis that I could then ask a question to in this environment. And when I ask him this question, he will get an email, be able to click on that email, and it'll bring him right to this transaction where he could answer my question. All right. So just like we have this information available to us by projects across the financial systems, we can also use attributes of projects. So as an example, I'll just drill down on one of the projects here. And that's going to bring me to the project setup screen. Now in this project setup, I can see some information like this is a project for a single family home. And they had a floor plan called Plan 24 on this project. I have crew number 1 working on it. So if I can write from this window, from this drill down, if I needed to make changes and I have the security access to do so, I can click on edit and then make changes. So I could change that job type or anything in here. I could select a project manager for this project, for example. Okay. We'll get more into the actual job setup here in a little bit. But what I want to point out is that this job has attributes. These attributes are the things that have been selected in the fields. And these fields can be fields that you choose. The system obviously comes with some of these fields, but any field that you want to add, you have the ability to add the field on here and track additional data. Now with those attributes, I can pivot my data on any of those fields. So you saw that field that said floor plan here. So here are all my floor plans. And now I can see all of the same report as above, this contract amount, subtotaled by floor plan. Now you could subtotal it by project manager or any of those other fields as well. This is just one example. And by clicking on a floor plan here, then it would give me an expansion of that floor plan and all of the projects that would roll up to that floor plan. If I wanted to see any of these items from my dashboard expanded out, I have this little magnifying glass here on the right-hand side, and I click that. I'm going to let that report take up my whole screen. I'll verify the date that I want to generate that from. And from here, I can interact by just clicking on the arrows next to them and having those different floor plans expanded, and I would see all the projects that that roll up to it. And then from here, again, I can drill down to see those source transactions. Okay, so I've shown a little bit about how we can pivot information on these projects. I'm going to show a little bit more detail of how we can use those projects, and then I'll expand it beyond just the jobs or projects themselves. Here we have an example of a project profitability report, and this has the look and feel of just a income statement. In fact, that's what it is, where we can see a project-based income statement. So the different columns are my different projects, and then the rows here are just my income statement. So just to give an example there, that I can pivot that data in a different manner from the general ledger. And so far I've talked about this in project-based information. But Intacct uses what we call dimensions, and project is just one of the many dimensions available inside the application. Everything that I've done and shown here with a project, we can do the same thing either by customer. So here's the same report, but broken down by customer instead of job. We could do the same thing by vendor or employee or department or location or specific industry if your organization has multiple industries that it serves. There's really a lot of different ways that we can slice that data and present the information the same way. So going back to that first example where we had all of that information from the project overview, I could pivot this instead of by project, by subcontractor as an example. All right. So the look and the feel of the user interface and user experience inside of Intacct gives us the ability to explore the data, to slice the data, to present the data many different ways to achieve the information that each individual needs to achieve inside the application. So project managers would be looking at it one way. The accounting team or controller might have a different way that they want to see that information. The user interface across the Intacct allows us to really learn the product quickly because it's pretty intuitive working in the application, and be able to expand just that section of knowledge that we may have so that users in the application themselves can seek the data that they're looking for themselves. All right, I'm going to go into one of my entities here, my residential entity, and look specifically at some more detail about how we can automate some procedures and provide good information into a project. So I'm first going to jump into a specific project here. So I'm just going to click on my favorites menu. Well, that's something I should mention, is that in the application itself, I have a favorites area, kind of like bookmarks on a web browser, that I can flag or mark as my favorite areas so I can quickly navigate the application. Just to give an example, I'm logged in as a user that has access to everything. So if I look at my jobs, for example, there's many things I can do in a job, like look at my jobs and my cost codes, and work with transactions like invoices and timesheets. But I don't do all of those frequently. So I will flag the areas that I want quick access to by just clicking the star over here. And when I do that, it becomes available in my favorites list. All right, so we're going to look specifically at a WIP report and work through that WIP report. So let me just click on refresh this view. So this is that job that we were just looking at with the setup that we saw was a single family home and the floor plan. And it's basically just the core information has been set up on the job so far. We have a contract amount and an estimate. So we can load the estimates inside of the application. We can load the schedule values of the contract for the owner. And this WIP report then, as we go through using the application, this WIP report is going to populate and provide a lot of information. Now, a little background on this specific WIP report is it's one that I designed, and I chose which columns that I wanted to display on my WIP report. You can have it's really open to whatever columns you would like to see. Most WIP reports don't have this many columns, and in fact, there's many other things that I could include on the WIP report if I wanted to. But I'm going to walk through this example here using these columns, and I have named these. The users can specify how they want to name these columns, and I've just kind of used the alpha characters here to give an idea of how the columns are calculated, if it's a calculated column, or where the information is coming from, just to reference them. So we can see again this contract amount and original estimate of this job. Okay, so I'm going to leave this tab open. See if I can hide this. Okay, leave this open here, and I'm going to open up duplicate that tab so I can come back to this report here often as I go throughout the application. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is to post a subcontract agreement that will be a commitment here. So I'm going to leave that report open again, move to a different tab, and go into subcontract agreements. Now, I've already saved one for this project, so I'm just going to save it. You can see it's in draft mode, so it hasn't been committed or posted yet. So I'm just going to click on edit this subcontract agreement. And this gives us a little bit of the look and feel of entering a transaction. We select a date and a vendor for this subcontract agreement. Payment terms, of course, and we can have attachments. Attachments are added very simply. We can just grab a document from our desktop, drag it into the field, and this is just an Excel file here. That attachment is part of this record. All right. We have a lot of information of things that we can track on these subcontract agreements, and they're all optional. So whether or not we track fields for scope, we have those options, and these can be very large fields with a lot of information. Or if we don't need to track the scope on our subcontract agreements in our accounting system or on our printouts, then we could not have that scope section show. Internal and external references. So internal is fields used by my company, and external is something that we might print on the subcontract agreement for the vendor to see. All right, I'm going to continue to scroll down here to this detail coding where we're just selecting the job and the cost code. And we can see that this subcontract agreement is by price. It could be by price or by quantity. So I have a subcontract agreement for $25,000. We have the ability to track retainage if we so choose. I'm just going to leave this as a $25 commitment here and click on post. Now, if I clicked on this print or email button and I had a email address saved for my vendor, they would receive this contract in an email as a PDF. All right, so now that I've posted that, I'm going to go back down to my WIP report and refresh that WIP report, and you'll see now my open commitments of $25,000 for that subcontract agreement. So again, we're just building this this WIP report as we go along. All right. So the next thing I want to do is to import in a cost to complete. Now we do have windows to enter in a cost at completion. You can either fill out the cost at completion or cost to complete, and then the other one would be calculated. To make this a little bit faster, I have information in Excel for my estimates. So I'm just going to click over to my job estimates here, and I'll just filter this by my current project that I'm working in. I have an original estimate of when this project was created, and that's where we would have got that first $245,000 in our WIP report. But all of these other calculations that I'm using in the system are, instead of calculating off the original estimate, which I could do, I'm going to be calculating off of a cost to complete estimate. So I'm just going to import this from Excel, my cost to complete. So if you have a estimating system, maybe you're using Sage estimating, you could have that system already calculate or integrate directly to Intacct, and then populate here with your estimate, either original or if you're keeping those things up for your forecasts. All right, now that I have that information imported, I'm going to go back to my WIP report and refresh that. You'll see it's as we're building this data, it is building our WIP report out. So we can see the cost to complete here. I have some change orders already in that estimate. Some of them are approved and some of them are pending. Your cost at completion here, and all of these, as I mentioned earlier, you can choose which fields you're using to calculate this data. So just similar to Excel, you define which cells you would use to be calculating. All of that data is done here inside of Intacct. All right, so we can see an estimated gross margin off of our estimated profit and our contract amount here. All right, so far, right now I have no expenses, no cost to date. So because I don't have any costs, I have 0% complete, calculated percent complete. So the next thing I'm going to do is go back to that subcontract agreement, and I'm going to receive an invoice against that subcontract agreement, which will start to populate my fields, my cost fields, and all the fields that are calculated off of costs. So again, I'll just look at my subcontracts. I'll filter it by this project here, and I can see my subcontracts and have this one for Adams Electric that we posted earlier. And I can simply click on convert to an invoice, and that will allow me to convert a portion or all of this subcontract agreement to an invoice. I'll put in an invoice number that we received from the vendor, subcontractor. And instead of $25,000, I'm going to say we received an invoice for just a portion of it for $15,000. I'll go ahead and post that. Now I am posting these transactions without approvals required, but you could have an approval workflow set up as well so that when I go to submit that for a posting, it would go through a proper workflow, maybe the project manager or maybe my supervisor, to be able to review and approve that information. Okay, so I've refreshed my report. You can see my open commitments now is $10,000 and my cost is $15,000. Also, it's used those calculations to see what is my percent complete. Right now I'm at 5.86% complete based off of that cost that I've incurred. So transactions would go throughout the month and you would be incurring the costs. You would be calculating your total cost plus earned profit, which calculates your over and under billings, or some people break this out into two fields. They're earnings in excess of billings and billings in excess of earnings. So depending on which way the sign is in fact here, it's going to populate one or the other. It also tells me that from a revenue standpoint, I've earned $20,000 in revenue, but I haven't posted any revenue yet. So it tells me that I need to adjust my revenue here. So in Intacct, this is where we're leading. In Intacct, we have the ability to separate out billings and revenue so that our WIP reports and our revenue could be based off of my cost, my percent complete based off of cost, but my billings might be done in agreement with the owner or an observed percent complete. There might be many different ways I'm calculating my billings, and it may be different than how I want to recognize the revenue. And that's something that Intacct can automate, and that's where I'm leading with this process. So I'm going to go back here to my actual contract for this project. Okay, here's this contract. And in the contract itself, so we just have one billing line item for this contract for $350,000. And you can see I have a billing template and a revenue template. Now my billing template is calculated off an observed percent complete. That gives me the ability to talk with the owner and come to an agreement of how much we're going to bill at any given time. Whereas my revenue that I'm booking on the project is really based off of my costs percent complete. So looking at my cost versus my budget or my estimate to figure out how much revenue I want to recognize on that project this month. And this can be automated. Right now I've turned this more into a manual process so that we can step through it and see it today. But this process could be an automated process. All right. I'm going to jump back to my jobs. And Jeff, if you see questions coming in, I have my screen shared, so I'm not seeing any questions. So if questions come in, please do interrupt and I can pause and walk through those. All right, so this is that job setup window I was in earlier, where we set up some information about the jobs. We also have many other tabs we're tracking on the jobs. And one of the things that we're tracking on this additional information is that observed percent complete. So you can see as of January 31st, 2020, I was 1% complete. And then as of February 29th, I was 7% complete. So I added 6 more percentage for a total of 7% complete. Now, my billing in this case, in this project, is being calculated off of this percent complete. So I've populated 2 different dates for that percent complete. Now, at the end of the period, we're going to go through the process of actually billing this job out. So if I bill as of January 31st, it's going to want to bill out 1% of the contract. So to do that, I can come down in here to generate invoices. And I'm going to filter this out just to look at that one project, but we could be doing this in mass if we wanted to. So I'm just going to say this is by job and select my job that I'm interested in. and click on preview. Now, one of the things that Intacct does for billing is it's going to track all of the things that are billable in the entire system so that when we go to generate the bills, we can see everything that's outstanding. Now, for any projects that have T&M, that might be timesheets or employee expenses. We can see any accounts payable. So we can see any of the things that would be billable, including general ledger transactions if we have them. In this case, this project really just has one order entry or contract that's going to be billable. And this tells me right now that so far, I've marked 1% complete as of January 31st. I haven't invoiced anything yet. So I should be invoicing 1% of my $350,000 contract, which is $3,500. Okay, so it's telling me, it's recommending that I bill that. If I needed to override that information here, I can still override what percentage I want to bill for at the time of invoicing. So I'm going to click on create invoice, and it's going to tell me it was successfully created. I'm going to go back to my WIP report. Now you can see right now in this first example, before I refresh my data, I have billings to date is 0. And it tells me I've earned $20,000, but I haven't billed anything yet. When I refresh my report here, now it tells me my billing to date is $3,500. And I've still earned $17,000 more than I have billed. This didn't adjust the revenue because revenue in this project, this specific project, I've decided to separate out the revenue in a different manner. All right. So just so we can kind of see how this would flip, I'm going to go through. You can see that I'm really only a calculated percent complete at 5.86, but in my observed percent complete for February, I was 7% complete. So I'm going to invoice the other 7, and we'll see then this number is going to get flipped to billings in excess of earnings. So just so we can see that process. I'll cancel that here and generate invoices again. This time I'm going to do it as of February 29th. And again, I'll just filter it by that job. Now it's going to tell me here as of February 29th, I was 7% complete. And that means that I've already invoiced 1%. And so it wants to invoice another 6% of the project, which is $21,000. Okay, so I'm going to create that invoice. Jumping back to my WIP report here. This is now saying that I've billed almost $4,000 more than what I have earned. So it flips that around.
Hey, Eric, I'm giving you a 10-minute warning.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. One more thing to talk about here is, and that's the automating that revenue side. So that revenue booking, a lot of times what people are doing is we're looking at their trial balance, calculating out the WIP and how much we need to book and what that process is. But Intacct can also automate that process. So I'm going to jump back over this tab here and look at my revenue schedules. So in my revenue schedules here, I'm going to view all revenue schedules and apply the filter here. And it's going to tell me that I have 2 revenue schedules here that are ready to be booked. So one of them was from the January, one of them was from the February, and we're reclassing a portion of this revenue for this billing for revenue. So this is telling me it's going to calculate out how much revenue should be booked based off of my percent complete. And if I change this to be post revenue here, okay, posting that revenue, then I can decide which ones it is that I want to post. I can post all of them or one or more of them. And when I do so here, it's going to update my WIP report here to be actually move those portions. Now I've just moved a portion of that revenue. I didn't post all of it. So you can see there's still $19,000 of revenue to book. But no longer do you have to do that, perform that calculation in Excel and come in and make journal entries. The system can process that information for you. You can have it automated, or I've chosen to review the schedules and then post them manually. You could have it automatically post as well. But both the revenue and the billing can function as the project progresses through the system. That allows us to scale the size of projects and the number of projects that we do without adding more overhead of people to review and calculate and Excel spreadsheets that we need to maintain. All right. So one of the things I wanted to get across here is that with the Intacct, the application, we have the ability to automate many of those procedures that sometimes can be pretty labor intensive or mistake ridden, error prone. All right, Jeff, I know that you had some things to follow up here, and I know that you're going to give me a few more minutes, but do we have any? I wanted to pause here and see if there's any questions before we wrap up the demonstration.
Do you have a question about payroll processing and Intacct, and also wanted to make sure maybe you could touch a little more on job setup and talk about some of the flexibility of the job structure that some of the folks that are on here might be interested in, and some of the things that we're not able to do in Sage 300 today as far as parent-child relationships and cost codes upon layers.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. That's a good, those are all good things. So this is an example of the job setup, taking that latter question first. We can go in as much depth as we want. So you can see here we have a subdivision. That subdivision is broken up into lots, and those lots are broken up into phases. And some phases maybe even have a change order. And each one of those projects becomes a child project, if you will, of the one above it. So we can continue to nest. I know in Sage 300, you can go just 2 levels of hierarchy of your project and your extras. And here we can go 10 levels deep if we would want to do that, to be able to track that information. The flexibility there for not just the projects, but also for the cost codes. You can define the cost code. So if I jump into that project that we have been looking at here and see the cost codes for that project, you can have different series of cost codes. So here I'm looking at my residential cost codes. I cleverly started them with R's so I could see that. And again, we can have those layers there if we need to do that, but we can have different sets. So we could have a developer set of cost codes and a residential, or a small project versus a large project, or a remodel versus new construction. So we can set those up and then assign those to individual projects. Furthermore, if we wanted to make a custom cost code for one specific project, that's easy to do as well. And then finally, the payroll. Intacct has the ability right now to record timesheets and then work with different payroll providers that would run payroll and track all of those costs by project. As of January 1st, 2022, Intacct will be rolling out its construction-based payroll inside the Intacct application with full support of unions and certified payroll and all the things that we deal with in construction. So as of right now, the timesheet collection can be done in Intacct. All the work disbursement between projects or work breakdowns of projects can be done inside of Intacct timesheets. And then it can connect to dozens of other payroll providers to actually run the payroll and then come back to Intacct with a journal entry of all of the payroll costs. Was there something I missed there, Jeff? Those questions?
Nope, nope, I think you got it.
Great.
Maybe talk, Eric, to wrap up. Many, and we don't have to show it, but we just have a few minutes left, but maybe talk about smart rules and sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. A lot of the folks on here use My Assistant, or they
Sure.
use Office Connector today, or they might use Piracle Create a Check, and maybe just talk about that, how we do those types of things inside of Sage Intacct, so we don't need to bring in third party or other applications to do those types of things.
Yeah, great. So Intacct has the ability to what we call smart rules or smart events, two different things inside of the application that would check the data as we're using the application. So similar to My Assistant, but kind of wide open in terms of what you want to do with it. So some examples might be your smart rules. You might validate the information across something. So you might say, like, for example, if I'm using account, office supplies, then I have to specify which department those supplies were for. Or if I'm posting a transaction to a specific location with the entity, then maybe only certain employees can be flagged, or certain vendors can be flagged for those transactions. Basically, it validates the data as we enter it, so that we're not catching mistakes through an audit or through a month-end review, but catching them upfront. So we can set up those types of rules to check the data as it gets entered. And then smart events allow us to trigger something based on an entry. So you could say, for example, every time I create a new job, then post a transaction with the square footage to my statistical account, or email the job manager to let him know that the project has been created and is ready for the next process or billing review or something like that. So you can trigger emails or events in the system based off of an entry or based off of the fields that have been filled out in a specific transaction or record. So that's a smart event. Smart rules, it kind of replaces that Office Assistant tool plus some. From an Office Connector standpoint, all of the reports inside Intacct can be exported to Excel, and they're formatted properly. I know a lot of applications talk about exporting to Excel, and when it gets to Excel, it's all a garbled mess that you can't do anything with. But inside of Intacct, if we export a report from the application to Excel, it's formatted like the report was when you were viewing it. And then you can do whatever you want to do with that in Excel. So you don't need a separate application to use the Office products with those.
And many times we don't even need to export it out of Intacct, because the functionality and the things maybe in 300 that you're trying to perform over in Excel, we can actually do in Sage Intacct itself without leaving the tool.
Exactly. That's the idea, is that the things like that WIP report example is like, you should use the application to do the reporting and the calculating and all those things, instead of manually doing that in Excel each time. You also mentioned the create a check. So Intacct can print checks with the Micker coding on the bottom of the check automatically. The idea of a cloud application, it's much more flexible too. So beyond just printing signatures and Micker printing, you can print a signature of the person who approved the check inside of the application. So to have that oversight of signature ink, I guess, so that no ink, no signature would be printed unless a person approved it. But you also have the ability to kind of leverage services beyond just our own office for those purposes. So you could say that every time I approve a check, I want Intacct to print it, stuff it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and get it in the mail. So Intacct offers services like that. It's I think it's $1 per paper check to print it. And when you look at the cost of a stamp and the cost of the labor to stuff the envelope and the cost of having check stock on hand, it's typically more cost effective to have them perform that function than you do it yourself. So there's all kinds of services with a cloud-based application like that are available. I could go
Right. Well, I
on,
know,
Jeff,
Eric,
but I don't want. I know that you needed some time to wrap up too.
yeah, just we got just a few minutes left, and thank you so much. I'm going to maybe you can make me the presenter, Eric, and I'll share my screen just to kind of wrap up here.
Sure. All right, so you should be the host now.
I think we're sharing this up here. Awesome. And thanks, Eric. I know we're really, I mean, with our time constraints today, we're just barely, getting a chance to, see the software. And, the idea of today was to just allow some of you folks who haven't got to see the software to, get a taste for it. But as you can see, it's a modern cloud-based technology. It offers a lot of things that we're not able to do today, or easier to do inside the Intacct with the cloud solution. Obviously, can lower your IT cost by moving to the cloud and allow users to connect remotely easily in the world that we live in today. And also, one of the things that's been very exciting for us at Skyline, it's been a new concept for us, but Sockeye has been doing it for a while, and I really appreciate it. The customer success plan that I alluded to in the beginning. So it's a subscription based, as part of the solution. And really, the Sockeye approach is there's a team of consultants that you work with when you're implementing. It's all inclusive. There's many things that are included in it: implementation and training and ongoing support, and helping you with selections of third-party products, or making recommendations on, or taking a look at your business processes, new hire training. It's an all-inclusive custom report writing that's inside of the Intacct application. So a little different model than you're used to, but it's very exciting. I know the customers that have been using that have been very happy, and you're not worrying about getting invoices and those kinds of things. So, and one really big thing that Sage is offering right now for existing customers, and I've not seen anything like this before, and I've been around for 25, 26 years, but for customers that are looking, if the timing's right, there's a trade-in offer through the end of June that you can save 50% off. So it's of the first year annual subscription. Because this is cloud-based, it is an annual subscription, a little different model than folks are used to on 100 and 300 today and having an annual maintenance. It's all in a monthly subscription. So if you have some interest, you want to learn more about it, you can reach out to me or to John or to Pat, wherever you're at, who you're working with. But I really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today. And I know we had some more questions, and we'll make sure that we'll answer those questions by email if we didn't get a chance to answer them. But yeah, today was just a real high level. And if you want to see a presentation for your team, we're happy to do that and take a deeper dive and look at situations that are specific to your guys' needs. So thanks everybody for joining, and have a great rest of the day.